Hello YouTube. It's been a couple of weeks since I made my last video. I was actually out of town for 2.5 weeks and working on projects before that, and sometimes I don't want to deploy project and disturb things in the rack. So they had to wait until I got back into town. So today's video I'm going to be talking about Nextcloud. This is going to be the first of two videos. This one here is going to be just how to set it up in Proxmox, the virtual machine that you can download from the website that's kind of pre-configured, and how to go about setting that up. And again, there's a couple of different ways you can do this. You can the first thing that I tried with Nextcloud was creating a Ubuntu virtual machine and using Snap installation, but it just didn't coalesce the way that I liked it to, and I thought that the virtual machine that they provide a really good starting point for beginners like me, because I've never done anything with Active Directory type configurations, and all of that is sort of done for you if you use the virtual machine from UCS. That's a Univention corporate server. It's actually a Debian-based, distribution, and but they've really done a lot of slick things to the UCS environment. They've got a nice landing page. You'll see that. And a lot of the pre-configurations are just kind of built in. So the virtual machine this way to just get you started with UCS and with Nextcloud. You can do all that free. You can set it up and get started in probably less than an hour. But it does have a couple of things that you're going to have to do to make this work, because it requires a well, if you want to be able to reach it from the internet, it would require a fully qualified domain name, right? But I don't want to go out and purchase a domain name. I don't need to do that at this point, especially for some testing. You can do it internally, so that it never leaves your network. But I like to be able to back up files from out on the internet, from my phone. One of the nice things, the iOS app that integrates into Nextcloud can actually update your pictures and videos directly back to the Nextcloud server here at the house in the rack, with very little configuration here up front. So again, a couple of ways you can do this. So I'm going to show you the way that I did here for the virtual machine. And the next video that I do will actually be the kind of ultimate way to do it, which is kind of a roll your own. But again, we'll get to that in the video. But for this one here, we're going to go to show you the quickest way to do that. If you just search Google for Nextcloud, it's going to pop up here with the website, first one, nextcloud.com. Nextcloud is actually a fork of OwnCloud, if you've heard of that one before. The guy who started up OwnCloud didn't like the direction, I guess, that they were heading with his software, so he forked it, and it's back to being completely free, essentially. So you can go to the Nextcloud website, or you can go directly to that that install link right there. But either way you get to it from the Nextcloud site, you actually kind of go here, and right here on the left hand side you click download, and down at the bottom left there's the appliances button. Now you would think that this home version of it, an appliance that I'd be trying to start with, and I did go there first, but that guy's already done a lot of pre-configurations to it, and he's trying to sell you the virtual machine for not a lot of money, and support to go along with setting that up. But that wasn't really where I started. I started again with Ubuntu and that Snap package there, but didn't actually like that, so I came back to this for the pre-configured virtual machines. which is, you know, this one here, this appliance. But what I ended up going with was, you know, this enterprise appliance, and I was kind of concerned with that at first, but it's actually super easy, and so don't be concerned at all that, you know, that's you know, what this is supposed to be, enterprise, like you can use your phone. So what this takes you to is the Univention website. For this particular virtual machine, since my hypervisor is Proxmox, I'll be using this KVM image here. You know, you can't see my cursor, but it's the, of those four, it's the blue box right there. And so I've already downloaded this so as not to waste any time. You know, and the configuration piece of the actual UCS server and Nextcloud, all the steps, once you've got it fired up, no matter which kind of program you're using, are all sort of the same. So even if you're using VirtualBox and that's how you want to test it out, you know, ignore the rest of this piece, first part on how to do this in Proxmox, but, you know, set it up using method for VirtualBox, and the rest of this video, you know, the setup instruction should be relatively the same. So you're going to want to download that KVM image, and what it'll do is it will give you a, I'm going to bring up FileZilla here, which is my favorite app for being able to transfer files directly into my Proxmox server. This the top file there on the left hand side is actually what you download, and that's the you know, Proxmox compatible UCOW2 file for the virtual machine. And so the process that you go through for setting that up inside of Proxmox, what you're gonna end up doing is creating a blank virtual machine, and then going and finding it here on the right hand side, you know, where that virtual machine is located, and, you know, whatever that file is, you copy the name of it onto that download, which, you know, I created a copy of the file on the left there, and already and copied it over here, so this is actually that file. But you know, you put it in there, and so let me show you that on Proxmox real quick. Back to the browser, Proxmox itself. So here in the Proxmox web interface, at the top, you want to create a virtual machine, and pay attention to this virtual machine ID number. So it's going to be 108. Now again, I already did this, so I'm just going to kind of put in some test information here, and you know, sort of walk you through it. But under the OS, you're going to choose do not use any media. You know, that's because you're essentially going to delete this file anyway, so you don't need it in there. So under Linux, you leave it at this the kernel settings that are default. Under the hard disk here, of course, you want to store this, you know, wherever it is in your volumes. Mine are set up differently. I have mine mounted as different volumes. Some people use pfSense. Some people use the LVM you know, methods. I'm a little old school. I like to mount them the way I'm used to. But the virtual machine is actually set at a size of 50 gigabytes, right? So you know, at first I created, when I was testing this out, I created the virtual machines with 120 gigabyte you know, hard drive space, but the virtual machine was only set to 50, and I couldn't figure out a way to resize it. So that, you know, there might be a method to do that, but for right now, you know, you probably just want to set that to 60 gig as a minimum. Now on the CPU side of the house, you know, the number of sockets, number of cores, I gave it 1 socket and 4 cores, because, you know, that's one of the possibilities of the Dell R710 that I'm working with here. I do have some resources available to do this, and then the minimum RAM size that you want to give it is 4 gig, because I started off with 2 gig, and it really is memory intense to run the entire operating system and Nextcloud on top of it. So it was peaking out that 2 gig pretty regularly. So 4 gig is perfect. It'll still use around 2, and then it's got some overhead room there. So on network, you want to give it, I think I gave it the Intel one. Doesn't matter. Well, it might, but didn't to me because Intel is working correctly. And then here on confirm, these are all the settings that you've set it to, where it's going to put it, the location. You don't want to start this thing up after it's created because, again, you didn't put an operating system there and you actually wanted the file that it's going to create. So then you would click finish, and what that's going to do, for me, it was this virtual machine 104. And so once that was set up, that's the point where you come back to FileZilla, and you find that one that it makes. I found the 104 image. I copied the file name to the virtual machine that I downloaded, and then deleted the one the blank one that we just created, and then I copied from the left, and you drag and drop over into that file folder, and this is essentially what you wind up with. So inside of Proxmox itself, as soon as you go back here to it, it will essentially believe that is the machine. You can click onto one of the other virtual machines and then come back to it, and it sort of refreshes, and just to make sure that it's going to pick up that new file, but it's the exact same name, so there's no reason it shouldn't. So again, I'm all set up here, and then what you're going to do is before you hit the start button, which is up here at the top, you want to hit console and bring that up. And so I already have a virtual machine console brought up here, and because this is just the way I like to do it, to bring up the VNC window for it first, separate, and then actually start it from the commands inside of the virtual machine. Just personal preference. You can do it several different ways. We're going to start this one up. Get here. Okay. Looks like that's, yep, begin the installation process. And we'll wait till it gets to the first part here. Okay, so the first thing here it asks you is for your location. I'm in America. You can go ahead and change these settings if you want to, but the standard keyboard layout worked perfectly for me. Hit next. This is an important bit here. The way that they have this set up was to use DHCP, and it lets you manually choose it at first. So this whatever one it picks up is going to show up in your config files, and you can go and delete that later on. But you want to set this to static instead of DHCP. So I'm going to pick up use IP address that I already have pre-configured for port forwarding, and I'll show you those settings here in a bit as well. So the gateway for your router and your DNS, this is all the external piece. And now this machine is actually going to be its own DNS. So you trust me, just leave the settings the way that they are, because I thought for sure I was doing something wrong, and turned out all the problems I was having after that point was from me screwing that up. So but I'll go through those settings here in a minute. So you set that up to a static IP address and select next. Okay, so this is your, assuming this is your only UCS system. So again, you're going to set it up as a new domain directory. I haven't touched any of the other options. I'm just setting this up fresh. I don't have a domain of my own to join. This is going to create a new one essentially. So next. So this becomes important right here. You don't have to put anything in the organization name, but here in the email address, in order to use UCS, it requires a license file, and it's simple. All you do is put in an actual email address that you own, and the server will automatically send it to you once you're further along in this process. So I went ahead and set up a test account, Nextcloud VM at yahoo.com. I believe what I set up. Check. Yep, the one. And we'll give it a password here. And very important, this it's both root, and it tells you it right here. It's both the root password if you're going to SSH in, and it's also the administrator account password. Now you can change that later on, and you probably should, once it's set up. But for right now, and to start things off, that's the way it's going to be. So we hit next. Now here is the very important piece of this. Again, if you're not going outside of your own network, if you just want to keep this internal for testing, you can probably leave this, the way that it is. It's not going to interfere with anything, but it will not be reachable from, outside your internal network. But this is kind of the important piece here. Is in order to be able to reach this from outside of the internet, I set up dynamic DNS. I run a pfSense router, or pfSense firewall. It does all kinds of things, my router and my firewall, all in one. For those of you that are familiar with it, dynamite program. Can't say enough good things about pfSense and Proxmox for that matter. Been doing me real good here for these past several months. But let me show you the important bits of setting up a free hostname with no-ip.com, which is the provider that I've been using for dynamic DNS all along, for different purposes. But I went ahead and they give you several of them for free. Now the problem is that these free accounts that they give you can't use wildcards. Now a wildcard is here the actual name of the device, of the server that you're about to build here, is this first part, right? So we're going to call it server, right? And then so the dynamic DNS site that I set up with no IP, and you can do this under the free one, is johnscloud.dns.net. And so if you click over here, it actually updates the LDAP base, and you need it to do that. But I don't think you should, I didn't mess with anything in here. Again, I don't know too much about the lightweight directory access, or what do they call that? Yeah, I don't remember. But it's essentially Active Directory, but I think the open version. Anyway, so a wildcard for an A record, which is any type of domain name, allows the domain itself, which this one is John's Cloud. Anything that's above it, before it, if you have wildcards enabled for that A record, any name, any device that you set up, um, further on down with the its name here at the beginning and then johnscloud.ddns.net, if you turn on wildcards for it, it'll resolve it. It'll point it to the IP address that you've set up for johnscloud.ddns.net, and that's important because most people don't have static IP addresses at home. You actually have to pay your internet provider more money for that. So that's where dynamic DNS came about. You're essentially sending a message out to the hostname provider saying, here's my new IP address, so that anybody trying to get from the internet to you is always routed correctly. Now, the problem with No IP's free service is you can't turn on wildcards. But if you do this, you can still just name the machine johnscloud.ddns.net. And you can see it already updated that LDAP base for me. So if you do it this way, Nextcloud will work. You can get this to work, but you're not future-proofing your UCS box, because this thing is pretty powerful. You can install other plugins, and one of the most important ones that I feel that I'll get to in the second video on this, on rolling your own essentially, is setting up a mail server. Well, in order to set up the mail server, you have to have chosen a real name, a real host name for this. So if you use this here, Nextcloud will work, and you can get it all to work even externally, fine, but you wouldn't be able to do any other services with it, and that's fine if that's what you want to test with. But so for right now, that's what we're going to do. We're just going to call it johnscloud.ddns.net, and which is actually the domain name. So we're going to hit next, and it is going to reach out and get any updates to the UCS domain. That's perfectly fine. These are all the settings that you've chosen there, and we're going to hit configure system. Actually, since this is going to take a while, I go ahead and talk to you about dynamic DNS and setting that up with no IP, and a little bit of the port forwarding that you're going to have to do in order to make this happen. So let's look at some pictures here. So this was a photo of the dashboard in No IP's website. You log in, and even if it's free, you go through this process. You click on that green button of create hostname, and you want to make sure that it's an A record. You've got a couple of different options on there, but A record is what you want. It will only let you create that first name, so the John's Cloud piece, or whatever it is you want to use as your host name there, your domain name. It won't let you make server dot at that level, and just lets you make this. But it's essentially as easy as that. When you pay for their services, which I ended up doing, as you can see on the right there, I've got 5 that I can make. With the free account, you can make 3, and you're not wildcards. Well, that wildcard feature again becomes so useful that I went ahead and paid, I think it's $24 for a year. And if anybody out there knows of a free way to do this, free dynamic DNS that allows the use of wildcards, please let me know. Post it in the comments, and let all of us know. It's free, and trying to test or even put something out there. I pay for it if you don't have to. So again, I set this up johnscloud.ddns.net, and then I can show you the picture inside of pfSense, where you set up port forwards to make this work. Coming in, essentially you want to be able to, on the NAT section of pfSense in port forward, you want to set up these first two down at the bottom here, port 80 and port 443. Now I've called them Nextcloud 80 and Nextcloud 443. It's actually for UCS. It's for the whole thing. It's going to bring you to the portal on 80, but the main feature I wanted to get to on there was Nextcloud. And these other ones here are actually for the next video, for setting up Capano, which is the free exchange-based webmail server. It's very handy to have. But again, can't really do that on this one because of the way that we're going about doing this with the dynamic DNS. So those are your port forwards. There's probably fancier ways of doing this with reverse proxying, but this works for me, and it's good enough for right now. So in order for your dynamic DNS host out there, noip.com, to be constantly aware of your new IP address as your internet service provider changes it, you need something that automates that process. Well, noip.com has programs that you can install on Windows or Mac, and there's stuff built into Linux already that can do it. And it basically reaches out and says, this is who I am. Update how to get to me. So in pfSense, they have a dynamic DNS client, and it actually has several of these different big companies out there, and NoIP free is one of them. So you put in your username and password that you use to set up your account, and then you put in when you create the record, when you hit add, it'll a box that opens, and with all these different settings, and the host name that you're going to put is and I've written it down here, johnscloud.ddns.net is essentially what I have set up in there right now, and right there under cached IP, it's going to once it's updates it the first time, it's going to be green, and it's actually going to have your current WAN IP address, or your modem has, essentially, that your internet service provider has provided. That's the furthest most outside IP address for your network. Then there's one further part of this. Once you've actually got everything set up, one very nice thing that pfSense also does, and if you don't do it, and I'll show it to you here in just a second, if you don't do it, because of the way DNS works, when you're inside of your network, if you try to go to johnscloud.ddns.net, it's actually not going to know where that is, right? Because it's reaching outside of the network, but that it's actually an IP address. So what you can do is, and then the software doesn't work correctly. There's an iOS app that I use for Nextcloud, and if I was here on my own Wi-Fi and I try to get to and just use the domain name that I have set up, it would fail. It can't resolve it. Well, come in here into the DNS resolver in pfSense, you scroll all the way to the bottom, you can actually put in a domain override. And what you do is you put the johnscloud.ddns.net, then you put the IP address of where the server is sitting inside of your network, and that allows you to have only one line in the iOS application. You essentially put in the HTTPS address of the Nextcloud instance using would be https://johnscloud.ddns.net /Nextcloud, and then the login username and password, and then the iOS app will be able to connect. And again, if you're using this domain override, inside of your network, that same address will work as it will outside, or out on your Wi-Fi. And if you don't set that up, you have to, in that iOS app, when you're on your own Wi-Fi at home, you actually have to set up a separate login using the IP address instead. So it's just nice. It kind of cleans things up for you. And that this domain override piece here is good, not only if you're just doing this testing, or if you get to the point, and like I'm going to show in the next video, of creating your own. It's very handy. So walk through those. I think that's about it as far as that is concerned. Okay. Click finish. And that's it. So as you can see, this is future and boot up. This is going to be the page that instance here through Proxmox is going to bring you to. What's cool about it is it's pretty fast to get to, because there's no essentially a desktop. You can install one, and it installs and shows up right here. It just takes a little bit longer to load. I feel it was necessary once you get used to everything. But if you wanted a desktop, you could. The nice thing here is, once inside of this virtual machine, you're still there. If you want to get to a login prompt, there it just says press any key, and you can actually get to login. So that's pretty handy. So what we're going to do here, since it's already up and running, check. Okay, so I did get the email from Univention with the UCS license file, so I'm going to download that one. Got that. Now we're going to go back to our web browser. We're going to open up the site that it says right there. So first instance that you want to go to here. Yeah, okay, so that's going to be portal. And of course, since you're using unsigned certificates, this is you're going to get. So you want to show details, visit the site anyway, authorized. I don't know if you caught that, but because I had done this before, I had HTTPS in there to try to go to the site securely, but we haven't set anything up yet. So this is the first page. You're at it. It brought you to the Univention activation piece right away, and we're going to hit upload license file, and I actually have it. Downloads that, and activation successful. And then here we go. So this is the Univention portal page, and where and you've already got the Docker instance, what it essentially runs in the background of this piece here. Now you can click on this, and it will take you directly to the Nextcloud instance login page, but you haven't set anything up yet. You don't have users. I mean, you have the administrator account, so you could use that one and get in, because it is actually the administrator of Nextcloud. But you want to do a few things here in the portal first. So up here on the top right, you want to click to log in. I'm going to bring you to the page. I'm going to use username and password that we set up when we ran through it. I'm not going to save that. Kill this afterwards. Now that you're logged in as the administrator, one thing to note is, and of course you all can't see it because of my camera. So, second, this. Okay, so in that bottom right-hand corner, you see the pencil. So that pencil, if you click that, will allow you to edit this portal itself. Change the background picture. You can choose, the order of these icons up here. You can actually, add more buttons essentially if you wanted to have external web pages or things like that pop up. There's a couple of cool features. You'll want to play with this if you customize this front end to it. But the guts of the UCS system here, the system and domain settings. And so this little button here is kind of cool up at the top, the click for menu options. As you can see, it just gives you the user settings, tells you about the root certificates, tells you that you're the administrator, right? And you can get back here to this main start page with this button right here, and you can log out. You notice you're missing, reboot the server. That option just isn't here. Well, let's see what happens when we click on this one. Brings us to everything that we need. Now they're gonna, ask you if everything worked great, if potential for improvement, everything worked fine. I'm not gonna send them statistics for this fake machine. But next, and we're gonna finish that out. And this is the core domain settings. And back here under the menu, you actually notice have this server option where you can reboot and shut down the machine. So very handy to know where that's located. First thing that you're going to want to do, depending on the age of the virtual machine that you've done, come in here and actually, so let's walk you through it first. Users here, this users button here under the users button, come in here and administrator is set up first, but you'll probably want a non-administrator to log into your Nextcloud instance with. We'll go ahead and set up John, and his name is Test, and just all lowercase John is login. Now you could do John.test, any combination you really want, but just keeping it simple. And you can next, and this is the easy way to do this setup, but we're going to go advanced here and show you this page. So right here is where we set up the password for John. And very typical, you can create users and then force them when they first log in to change their passwords. So that is here under account, and there's a little checkbox here under locked login. It's this first button. It says user. Here, I'll click it. You can probably see it. Yep. User has to change password on next login. That's a handy feature. And then actually under advanced settings, you got a Nextcloud button right here, and says you can put quotas in here. I'm not quite sure that this is forced, but you can also set quotas for particular use side of Nextcloud. And you got to remember, this virtual machine is only 50 gigabytes. So if you give everybody unlimited, you might run into some problems. If you choose to use this sort of long term. You can also remove access to Nextcloud with that checkbox there. Yeah, so that's it essentially for setting up the user account for it. And again, in the next video, because of the way we're doing this with the domain, we won't be able to set up email addresses. But this is where you would do it for a particular user. And then finally, we're going to hit create user. And so the nice thing is once you've created these users, they apply to any of the applications that you install. So you don't have to go into Nextcloud and set that user up. Because you're using that lightweight directory access protocol piece, it handles all of it, and it's baked right into UCS already in this machine. So that's pretty much the useful piece for setting up users, devices. If you were to join other computers to the domain, that would show up there, but you're not going to do that. So here under DNS, you've got your forward lookup zone and your reverse lookup zone. Leave these alone. Another interesting piece here is under the system itself, you have network settings, and as you can see, this is our IP address, and main name server for this machine is itself, and trust me, you want to leave that way. It's supposed to be that way. And then for external, this is actually going out through pfSense through the DNS resolver that I have up there for anything that's external. So again, take my advice, just leave that all the way that it is. So back here under domain, you actually have this is where you would set up the mail piece, the mail domain. If you were doing that, that's only in the next video. Here under the portal settings, these are the actual links out there on the portal. Let's see here, this Univention blog is one of the entries that's out there that you probably saw. That's the link to it. You could, if you really wanted to, go ahead and select that and delete it, and it would not show up on your portal. And then inside of these, like for Nextcloud, you'll see that the links for both the HTTPS internal, this is the one that we set up, for how I said that because of the way the installer works, it took an ICP. This one here, it's set up automatically, but is no valid. So you probably want to go ahead and delete that one as well. But then you also see that this should be reachable from https //johnscloud.dns.net/nextcloud, and we'll use that in our iOS app later on, or probably the same way in the Android app. That comes in handy, knowing that site there. Here under system, I already showed you the network settings piece. Another thing you're going to come into later on, if you do any settings, this is essentially the registry for this machine, and there's some settings that you can come in here and do when you're setting up like the mail server, but not really important for this one. Here under the software tab, first thing after you've got this installed and you've wandered around in here a little bit, go ahead and do software update. I'm going to click on that, and then behind the scenes, really what this is doing is doing an apt-get like on any other Linux installation, and you can see, maybe you can't, but it already found that there is a new Nextcloud Docker image that it can update to, and it also has updates to several of the packages for the operating system itself, for the UCS. So what we're going to do here, let's see, should we, in order to complete the recently executed action, okay, so they want you to reboot the system, so let's go ahead and do. Okay, we're back up. So you see that relatively quick. Just to get to the screen, if you install that desktop, it does take a little bit longer. But back to our browser here. Okay, on the notification piece, log back in. That one. And you could go to the encrypted page at this point. That would work. So gotten to the first one, but I'm just going to keep for now. Because this is the page we left, and it probably does it anyway, it's going to go look for software updates once again. Next thing that we've done, update the Nextcloud Docker to the latest version. That one, you can see the errata here. We're at 287, which is the latest version of it. But we're going to go to Nextcloud and hit upgrade. Okay. So while I may have chopped right to the end bit here, just know that that's a fast process. I mean, relative, it's okay. But all right. So Nextcloud is now updated to the very latest version. And then before we actually get to that, there's one last thing that you want to install, and that's Let's Encrypt. So that you can use HTTPS SSL encryption end to end for your server. That way, that no matter where you are, whether or not you are on a friend's computer at their house, you've got encryption to the next. Let's see. Way to do that, we go here to software, and we go to the App Center. Yes. These are all the different things that you can actually plug in, but again, you're kind of space limited. So some very cool projects here. Open project, pretty handy. But the one that we're looking for here is, let's see here, Let's Encrypt. Get ourselves some certificates. So I'm going to click install. Okay. So again, I've probably chopped that out, but we're to the point where Let's Encrypt is installed. This happens to be one of the applications. When you install it, you do have some follow-up. It is installed, but you don't actually have your certificates quite yet. So there are a couple of steps here you need to follow these instructions to do. And so the first thing it's telling you to do is to make sure that it's reachable. Make sure that it can get to, or Let's Encrypt can get to the internet for validation, essentially. So it says make sure that your system is reachable from the internet, and it gives you this example here. And so you would think that go ahead and try to test out the host name on DNS that you just created, right? So in my case, johnscloud.dd.net. Well, yeah, that threw me for a loop. So let's go ahead and use this. This is host space tac t space a and then space and then a just the host name for any site, really. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch back to the virtual machine here. I'm going to actually log in. Went to host tac a and jump .net. Of course, it returns IP address for the machine itself. So when Let's Encrypt, does its thing, all it's telling you here is just make sure that you can reach the internet. Again, my natural inclination was to try to test out the host name that I created on no.com, right? But of course, this is coming back. Well, that's because this box, this UCS box, is its own domain server. So I said, leave all of the settings alone. And when you're at this point here, you're just trying to get to anywhere, because it Let's Encrypt actually goes to, I think, its website first. Its website tries to go to your host name and circuit gets redirected. Got your certs. I believe that's the process. So in this case, all we want to make sure of first is that we have access to an internet site. So Yahoo.com. There you have it. So it can reach out externally. So this process for Let's Encrypt will work. So at this point, you should be good to and leave this box open, because the third step, and you're that back here in the console. But we should be good to go back here to our browser, and then here under App Settings, we're going to click that. Then we're going to, in the top box here, we're going to put in the domain that we created. So johnscloud.ddns.net. And we're going to pick the boxes for Apache and postfix. Probably don't need to do postfix because you're not going to do mail with this particular one, but I like to check it anyway because there is some postal software I think already installed in here. Does can. And then what we're going to do here is, and again, you're just putting the domain name in there, but HTTP, don't put anything else. You're going to hit apply changes, and this module is behind the scenes. It's actually going out, talking to the Let's Encrypt, going to your site, coming back in, and as the instructions say here, wait about 10 seconds after you've done this to go back in here into app settings, and you can actually see right here under status, it says, see, certificate refreshed at that time, which means you now have certs. It worked. It didn't throw any errors, which would show up in that section right there. So you're good. You now have complete SSL certificates, for free from Let's Encrypt. Great program. So we're going to cancel config there, and then this last step is to update your CA certificates. So again, we're going to go back to the virtual machine, and we're just going to run that command: update TAC CA TAC certificate. Update the certs. There should be one added. Yep, and then essentially you're done. So at this point, probably want to go back here in the browser, close out of this piece here, and server menu, reboot your server. Okay, rebooted. So we're back here to our browser, and we're going to go to, in the address bar, https ://216.24. Have it. So we're actually, it's off screen for you, but we are actually at, we've got a lock next to address bar up at the top, and you can actually click on it and show the certificate. So right now, this is a secure connection to this portal page, and you'll get that both externally and internally at this point because we've got everything set up. You can click login here. Want to, and log in as administrator. again, one of the things that I did, because this web page is accessible, from that site. If you were some other location to go to in a browser, on somebody else's internet, or even on your phone, not on Wi-Fi, but on your phone, you could go to it as well, just to test out the outside connectivity to this from the greater internet. If you went to https // in my case it's johnscloud.ddns.net, would get redirected right here to the web page. So one of the things that I set up, only folks that log in as administrators can actually see this system and settings. But there are many different that you can play around in here as far as visibility and who gets to do what. But regardless, when you get to this page, you don't even have to log in any longer here. As a user, you can just select Nextcloud, and it will go to login page for Nextcloud. And here, set up John as a user. No. Little funky at first because like I said, I logged in correctly there that first time. I didn't get that wrong. It actually took 2 logins. It pops up here at first, giving you your options. You've got a desktop app for Windows machines, OS X, Linux. You also have Android application and iOS app, and then you can actually get to calendars, contacts, and the files that you put in here through the web DAV links. So very helpful. This is what you start off with, and you can see up here at the top not only the files here, but they actually have virtual machine in this Docker instance. Somebody's done all this configuration work for you. They already have the dashboard and several of the different applications that, as the administrator, you can install. So got a gallery here which will show you photos, some stock ones that are actually in there. Circles is a chat program. This is for announcements that the administrator send out to different and it shows you how much you're actually using down here, and then in the bottom left hand corner, and then if you hit settings, it actually gives you the link on how to access the files through that web DAV. So you could mount that inside of a Windows machine that's separate from this server, and it will take you through the DNS connection to the file share, essentially. So you can upload things directly through like a mounted network drive. Pretty useful. There are lots of different things that you can do here. On the top right, this little gear, if you log in as the administrator, apps will show up right here under settings, and you can actually go in and uninstall and install different available applications for Nextcloud. But essentially that's it. I think as far as this tutorial is concerned, we basically went through the setup and installation with Proxmox and pfSense and no IP for dynamic DNS. This Univention corporate server, virtual machine that already has a Nextcloud instance installed into it, and it is very useful. But again, you are limited on space. This virtual machine has again 50 gigabytes and all of the different updates and things that you've run here have taken up some of that space. So you actually have less than the full 50 available to you for your files and things. This is actually now a working instance of Nextcloud and the Prevention corporate server that is accessible both internally and externally for your network, and it will work. So test it out, have fun. Again, if there's pieces of this that video that I've gotten wrong, or ways that you can do domain name hosting, dynamic DNS for free, please let us know. One of the reasons why I like using dynamic DNS and using the host names with wildcards for me is that anonymity. One of the things when you set up your own domain and you purchase a domain, you actually have to register it, and your personal information, unless you set it up, pay extra to register privately through some of these domain name providers. If you don't do that, then your actual name and address shows up in a whois lookup. Well, if you use no IP, their information shows up. Somebody does look up on that website that you created. But I think this is a very, very useful system. I can't say enough good things about UCS. They've done a lot of work to that portal, and like I said, I started off doing this and getting at least this far before realizing the wild cards and going a little bit further and realizing that if I wanted to create my own virtual machine, I should just use their ISO file for UCS itself and then build everything out on top of it. What I eventually ended, and that should be my next video. But if this one was helpful for anybody, or if you like it, please like and subscribe. I'm trying to reach that golden 1,000 subscribers, and I am not quite there yet. But if you've stayed on this long, I appreciate your attention, and have a good one.